Hi S3rpic0, how are you doing? This is my long-awaited reply to you. Apologies that I've been almost a year, I think, getting around to doing this video. Basically, I was intended to do a reply video to you, but your video was so well done and long that it was. I kind of realized that I needed some editing software probably to do a reply, because I couldn't really reply to everything you said off the cuff, so I kind of put it off till I got some editing software, which I finally got a few months ago. And also I had a bit of a kind of crisis where I'm basically not a utilitarian anymore, so the whole argument was about utilitarianism, and I'm on your side now to some degree. So my opinion was on the issues we were discussing were in a bit of a state of flux for a while, and partly due to some of the stuff you said. In particular, towards the end of your video, you were talking about this example of making halal meatballs, and that kind of thing has put me off utilitarianism a bit. This kind of high-handed, kind of making big decisions based on one's own values rather than taking into account other people's values. Also, when I was trying to do a reply to your video, I looked at one of your earlier videos, which was about intuitionism, and you were saying like it's good to base your morality on your kind of a balance of your own sort of moral intuitions. I was already an intuitionist in that sense, because my sort of gut sort of values, I think, do draw me mostly towards utilitarianism. But the thought I had watching your video was, if you're going to base it on your own values, why wouldn't you also bring into account someone else's intuitions? They also have sort of intuitions which would seem to be of equal merit to one's own on sort of face value. So that's the kind of moral position I have now, that I believe that we should, I'm kind of basing my morality on a mixture of everybody's sort of basic moral intuitions or values, combined with some sort of ideal rational process to kind of sort of balance them all up against each other. What that actually means in practice in sort of particular cases, I'm not quite so sure. I think that it sort of brings me back in a way to utilitarianism, in the sense that we're taking a lot of values and we kind of maximizing them seems to be the most rational sort of approach to it. But I have turned away from my hedonistic kind of focus, just trying to maximize pleasure minus pain, because people clearly do value other things. So I'm a pluralist of value now. Okay, so that's my utilitarianism gone. And so you, when it comes to answering your 3 points, I'm still sort of where I was in a way. I've kind of stubbornly, I think, stand by some of the things I believed earlier as a utilitarian. So let me press on to anyway replying to the 3 points you made in your original video and talked about in your second video. Okay, so the first example you gave was what I think of as the cookie situation, where you claim that a utilitarian, if a utilitarian and a friend and his or her friend have to share a cookie, and the utilitarian happens to like cookies 10% more, say, than the friend, then the utilitarian's kind of obliged to eat the cookie. We talked about, I mentioned that in the real world, kind of harmony between people probably counts more towards happiness than person's taste buds being satisfied by a little bit more. I think you acknowledged that stuff, but I think, if I'm right in saying, you said, I mean, what if you take away all the kind of ins and outs of the real world and just strip it away and say, you know, if it really comes down to that, it would still be a kind of selfish thing that the utilitarian would have to do if we strip away all the other complicated stuff. I think you accept, you indeed in your original video you kind of accepted that one should not be obliged to really screw oneself up for the sake of others, to a ridiculous degree. But I think you still stood by the claim that it shouldn't ever be kind of morally recommended to benefit oneself. I think the word you used in your latest video was it shouldn't be what did you say? Morally commendable, and may have been that phrase or something like that, to give oneself the cookie. I think a utilitarian could agree with you there, because what's morally commendable isn't exactly the same as what one should do. One should probably get up and get dressed most mornings, but it's not morally commendable because a selfish person would also get up and get dressed in order to go off and do their selfish things. When you use the words morally commendable, if those were the exact words you used, I think, yeah, the utilitarian can kind of agree with that. But in terms of what one should do in terms of the selfishness thing, I still stand by the kind of utilitarian thing there as reasonable. Like in the real world, I don't think the utilitarian would grab the cookie because a kind of slightly selfless society is better for happiness. But if that was somehow stripped away, then it seems reasonable that the kind of decision of who gets the cookie should be based on who will enjoy the cookie most. Okay, so your second example was on the desert island with Osama bin Hitler, and you're basically talking about dessert there. Dessert not in the afters of eating a meal, but people deserving things sense. Yeah, I mean, you say a lot of people would. I mean, you very candidly talk about how you wouldn't want to. You said it in quite a memorable way. You wouldn't want to introduce pleasure to a kind of evil mind, or a kind of really a horrible person or something. Yeah, that's. I think we are at a slight impasse there, as you said. It's kind of something you either feel in your bones or you don't. I've never had that feeling of wanting, to kind of wanting someone to be happy less because of, maybe I've had it a little bit, but kind of on reflection, I don't really want to deprive anybody of happiness, whatever they've done in the past. I think it's hard to tell how many people, because my philosophy now, I'm interested in how many people actually think as you do and how many think as I do, because I do have to acknowledge now dessert in my moralizing, because some people do seem to believe in it. It's hard to tell how common it is though, because I think for one thing, I think the determinism argument that I brought out is very good, I think, and I think people don't have a very good appreciation of determinism. So if people understood determinism better, then I think that would reduce their belief in people deserving to be punished. And the other point is people, I don't think really talk that much about, or that aware, or have thought that much about this distinction between something being of intrinsic value or being of practical value or instrumental value. So I think obviously in the case of dessert, it's if you don't make the distinction between the intrinsic and the instrumental value, you kind of you can't really appreciate whether you value dessert in itself or not. So I think if people did appreciate these things a bit better, I'd sort of guess, maybe I'm a bit biased, that they might go the way I've gone and reflect that that nobody really deserves bad things to happen to them, or kind of everyone deserves pleasure sort of equally if you take away all the practical stuff. Also, in terms of utilitarianism, I think utilitarianism could possibly survive this kind of attack you could just kind of amend it and say that you could have a utilitarianism where you are trying to maximize pleasure, but the pleasure of bad people counts for a little bit less. We kind of devalue them a little bit. So you could have something pretty close to utilitarianism, maybe even if you do believe in dessert. Actually, likewise, for the first example, the cookie example, you could amend utilitarianism to say that you have to maximize pleasure minus pain, but the pleasure minus pain of yourself counts for a little bit less, to try and deal with that. Okay, your last example was the harmonica example on the desert island. Yeah, I've been thinking about these things too much in the past year as I procrastinated about this video. So the harmonica example. Yeah, I wasn't quite clear whether you considered the harmonica example to be an example of utilitarianism being self-defeating, or whether it was an example of some other sort of problem with utilitarianism. To very briefly recap, you're talking about a case where a person's dying on a desert island and asks to be buried with his harmonica, and you as the survivor, as a utilitarian, would, well, it got a little bit complicated what you would do, but I think it's pretty clear the utilitarian wouldn't be honouring his friend perhaps quite as much as most of us would. Yeah, I mean, I sort of stand by well, in my new philosophy, I guess I should honour people a bit more, because there's probably people who do sort of value that kind of thing and keeping promises a little bit more than a utilitarian would. So I've come around to your view on it a bit more, I think. But I don't think, as a kind of attack on utilitarianism, I don't think it was. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think the utilitarian comes off that badly here. As a self-defeating thing, I'm not sure whether you meant it to be a argument about self-defeating. I think that the utilitarian, I don't know, I didn't see really, I just couldn't really see the self-defeatingness in it, if that was intended to be there. Also the general point, which you also talked about, which was the thing about if you try to laugh, if you try not to laugh, you sometimes laugh, and utilitarianism is a bit like that. I sort of acknowledge that utilitarianism could be like that. You could imagine an extreme sort of universe where, for some reason, if you have a utilitarian thought, it causes some houses to catch fire miles away and people to suffer. So there's no fundamental reason why utilitarianism can't be self-defeating. And you do sort of quite plausibly sort of say, well, I've only have to think of one one alternative way of thinking to utilitarianism that's better than it, and that would make utilitarianism self-defeating. Yeah, I mean, it sounded pretty plausible when you said it, but I just can't think of another approach that does actually do a better job than utilitarianism, especially when you bring in the fact that, as I was saying in one of my videos to you, utilitarian can take account of reality in its fully. So he or she can be kind of realistic and not think I'm a utilitarian all the time. They can go with their instincts most of the time and still be a utilitarian. I mean, to give your alternative, if a person did sort of completely forget about being a utilitarian in order to be a utilitarian, and just go with his or her natural sort of instincts, I think they would deviate. They might be better people by your reckoning, but I don't think they deviate from pleasure maximizing more. I think that they would sink into things like keeping promises being more important, perhaps, and I don't know, other sentimental things, maybe sort of selfish things like being loyal to their tribe or tradition or something. I don't know. They would do things that a lot of us think are morally important, but don't actually maximize happiness. So I don't really buy the self-defeatingness thing, but I'm not a utilitarian now, so I think I've come around to your way of thinking quite a lot. So I really appreciate the video you made to me. So sorry it took so long to get back to you, but anyway, I hope it was better late than never, and I hope you enjoyed my response. See you, S3rpic0. All the best.